We are about to start. Perfect. And as more people are jumping on, I'm really excited for the conversation we're having today, centering Black mothers as Mother's Day is approaching and how a guaranteed income can support their health and well-being. Okay. So here we go. Welcome everyone to Cash is Care, how a guaranteed income supports Black moms, a conversation exploring the ways in which a guaranteed income provided to Black women, specifically Black mothers, can lead to improvements in health, family and extended community relationships, and general quality of life for Black women and for everyone else. Again, my name is Ebony. I'm the program manager of Guaranteed Income for the Economic Security Project, a nonprofit working towards a federal guaranteed income policy that would provide an income floor for all Americans. This event launches our Black Mamas Week Cash is Care campaign and includes our new report called In Celebration of Black Moms, Cash is Care, which presents recent data on the positive impact guaranteed income has on health and how a guaranteed income policy centering Black moms and women will uplift society as a whole. To read the report and support the programs we'll discuss today, you can go to cashiscare.com. Guiding today's conversation, we are honored to have award-winning author and Fordham University Associate Professor of Political Science and American Studies, Dr. Christina Greer. Dr. Greer is currently working on a new book on the political contributions of Barbara Jordan, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Stacey Abrams. Before we jump in, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, Community Change, Springboard to Opportunities, Insight Center, Expecting Justice, Income Movement, Lighthouse, Groundwork Collaborative, and Economic Security for Illinois. Christina, thank you so much for joining us today, and I pass it off to you.
Thank you, Ebony, so much for having me. And hopefully all the viewers will be on the lookout. I'm writing 2 articles about Cash is Care and the work that Ebony and her colleagues are doing in the Amsterdam News and thegrio.com, so be on the lookout for that. And I'm also a proud board member of Community Change, so I'm so happy and honored that Community Change, under the leadership of Doreen Warren, are sponsors today. So I could think of no better way to spend a Monday than with these 3 amazing women doing this work. So our first panelist is Dr. Zea Malawa. She's the director of Expecting Justice, which oversees the Abundant Birth Project, a guaranteed income program providing $1,000 to 150 pregnant Black and Pacific Islander mothers in San Francisco. And in addition to leading Expecting Justice, Zea is a pediatrician and public health professional committed to improving health outcomes for children of color, and she sees patients at Mission Neighborhood Health Center. Next up, we have Dr. Aisha Nyandoro, who is the CEO of Springboard to Opportunities, which manages Magnolia Mothers Trust, the longest-running guaranteed income program in the United States since the 1960s and 70s. Now, on its 3rd cohort of mothers, the Magnolia Mothers Trust gives Black moms living in subsidized housing in Jackson, Mississippi, $1,000 a month in unrestricted cash for 1 year. Not only does Aisha run Springboard to Opportunities and the Magnolia Mothers Trust, she's the co-chair of the Guaranteed Income Community of Practice, a group of more than 200 advocates, policymakers, activists, community leaders, and more advocating for a guaranteed income. And last but certainly not least is Ann Price, the first woman president of the Insight Center in Oakland, California. Her work is both broad and deep, spanning child welfare, hunger, workforce development, community development, and higher education. Ann's work has been featured in many publications, and she's developed a Centering Blackness framework that addresses the intentional disinvestment, dehumanization, and exclusion of Black people from economic prosperity by centering the Black experience. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and I so look forward to this conversation. So the first question I want to throw out, and I guess, Zea, since I introduced you first, we'll go Zea, Aisha, and Ann. And this is usually a question that I end with, but I just feel like, one, I have to constantly remind myself, my students, and so many other people, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, to say nothing of the racial injustices and unrest that we're sort of carrying in our bodies on a daily basis, especially as women of color, more specifically as Black people in this country. So I want to ask, in the last month, it's been really painful to be Black. It's been a painful time for the Black community. In this moment, in these hard times, what gives you all hope? And I know I usually end with this question, but I kind of want to set the stage and sort of put us in that mind frame, since you all are doing such amazing work and you're seeing it in a granular level that some of us just aren't. So Zea, I'll start with you.
I feel like the future and the past give me hope. I think that, you know, being able to connect with so many amazing activists and activists who are able to do their activism in place in their job in the last few years, like that makes me so excited. Like my lovely co-panelists, the kind of work that they do, that is one of the things that gives me hope, knowing that I don't have to carry all of this on my own, not even close. There are so many amazing thinkers and doers that are holding this work along with me. And then of course the past, like I think it's also really important to remember that, you know, especially for, you know, African Americans who experience the Middle Passage, or at least I can say this is the community that I am most familiar with because this is my own community. I know that our community has had to endure a lot. And while I know that we hold a lot of trauma in our bones, I also know that we hold a lot of resilience and strength, ingenuity and capability within our bones. And so it gives me hope to know that we as Octavia Butler says, we are a harvest of survivors. And so I know that, you know, we are going to overcome this as well. And it gives me hope and excitement to see the actual overcoming happening, like as we speak, especially in the work of these incredible co-panelists.
Thank you, Zea. Aisha?
Yeah, no, definitely. I am hopeful for so many things right now. I am hopeful about the reality that we are having these conversations in mainstream, and it's not colleagues or allies having these conversations just as if they're secret pieces of our hearts that we're trying not to let the mainstream community have access to. I am hopeful that the community organizing that was done decades before and that was rooted, and that those seeds are coming to harvest, and that those of us that are here now, that we were prepared to meet the opportunity head on in order to really put plans and models and pieces in place to ensure that a lot of their dreams are coming to fruition. I am hopeful that when we started having these conversations about guaranteed income and taking a racial justice lens in the conversations in 2017, it was just a few of us. I remember the first conversation I had with Anne about the work that we were doing and her work around centering Blackness. And now here we are in 2021. And there are so many individuals saying, okay, we are going to be bold with this radical imagination as we chart a new path forward, and really say we are going to center our work, not just guaranteed income work, but we're going to center our work and name the reasoning why we even need a guaranteed income, and call out the racism and sexism that has been in place for generations. And so I am hopeful that it is some kick butt Black women right now on this panel leading this work, and that others are looking to us for our expertise and recognizing for the first time, you will not get our labor without our liberation. And that we are going to continue to move forward and build off of the models and the platforms that we are taking from our elders, and we are running across the finish line to get this work done.
Thank you. Anne, what are you looking
Couldn't
for?
say it better than Zea and Aisha just said it. You know, when I think about how far we've come, even over the course of my own career, thinking about the work that was happening during welfare reform, and I was thinking, what is going to happen to women? What is going to happen to Black women? And, you know, I felt that this was something that wasn't even a topic of conversation. There was no regard, no sense that their lives mattered enough to even raise it to the point of a discussion. And so when you think about what's happened over the course of even 50 years, the fact that you're seeing these types of approaches being tried, and you're seeing the leadership that's spreading all across the country, I really look at Zea and Aisha as my heroes, because they're actually bringing this into fruition, something that we have not done in half a century. So to me, the movement towards thinking about cash and what it means in the lives of people and bringing their real lived experiences to the forefront is unprecedented in our careers, right? In most people's careers. And so I'm excited and hopeful about what we're talking about right now, the depth, the fact that we're digging down into systemic and structural issues, that there are amazing organizers pushing this work. So I feel very hopeful a hope that this isn't something I haven't seen in my career. So I feel like finally there are these seeds that are being planted, and it's such an exciting time.
Well, I mean, Anne, I want to stick with you so we can drill down just a little bit. I mean, now this isn't the first time a group of Black women have sat down to discuss a guaranteed income, as you all have mentioned. This idea was popularized in the 1970s by groups like the Black Panthers and the National Welfare Rights Organization. So, Anne, start us off, why are we returning to the idea of guaranteed income? And what can it do, and what has it already done for Black women and Black moms?
Yeah, when you think about the fact that women were really leading this work, and I would say women even influenced the Panthers, right? And really understood that Black women have a clear and unobstructed view of power hierarchies from the bottom. And they understand the structures of our economy, how they work, and the role they play in family life. And so when they were fighting for a guaranteed income, they weren't just fighting for financial, uplift. They were really talking about the very fabric and structure of our relationships to one another, to community, and the fact that we have a system in place that does not truly value and regard families, Black women, and struggling women, right? And so to me, what was so amazing is really their understanding of what we see today. It's almost like these were folks who came out of sharecropping, understood that the entire pyramid of the Atlantic economy of the 19th century was predicated around the bodies of enslaved Black women, for the means to reproduce capital. And that the structure of our economy still works in a way that does that. They understood what that meant, not just for them, but for all Americans, for all struggling Americans. And so it's so foundational to think about where we are with those who are on the margins of our labor market. And those are primarily fundamentally Black women. So, we stand on the shoulders of these women. We stand on the shoulders of women before us who were not just talking in their kitchens, but got out and sacrificed their well-being, their lives, to fight not just for their communities, but for all Americans. So how foundational and how amazing is that?
Mm-hmm. Well, Aisha, I definitely want to bring you in because I know most of our viewers are looking at that beautiful painting of your mother and your grandmothers in the background. But can you build on what Anne has just laid out for us? Why are we returning to this idea of guaranteed income? What can it do? What has it done for Black women and for Black moms? And feel free to highlight some of the work you're doing.
No, yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And Anne laid out the beautiful history only as Professor Price can. It's whenever she teaches, I'm like, yes, let me take notes. And so I think it is definitely that history and that understanding of the power of cash. But I also think it goes back really when we're talking about this panel that we're on, as cash is care. And so when we really talk about what cash is able to do, it allows you to provide care. And care is the ability to provide a provision for whatever you feel that you need to be safe. And so cash allows that, whether or not that is getting food, whether or not that's caring for yourself, whether or not that's caring for your family, whether or not that's dreaming about the future. Cash allows you the ability to really zoom back and have the bandwidth to not always live under the thumb of scarcity, which for so many of the individuals that we work with, that is their reality. And the work that I do, I work with Black mothers in Mississippi. On average, our women make less than $12,000 annually. And the conversation that we don't have is that these are working individuals working in positions that we now consider essential, but we're not paying them as if they're essential, because in Mississippi, our minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. So individuals are not receiving the financial support that they need to dream about the future. They are constantly living with this survival mentality of what will happen today, what will happen tomorrow, and how far back will that set me. But not only that are they living with that reality, they are also living under the paternalistic, punitive aspect of our social safety net. So the women that I work with have every aspect of the social safety net entangled in their life. And so since that is punitive, that means whenever they go about advancing economically, they have to set aside what that means for themselves and their families because their benefits will be decreased. And so cash allows you the ability, cash without restrictions allows you the ability to not have to worry about a subsidy or a voucher. It allows you the ability to really center your needs and your families into the conversation about your future. And it allows you the respect that so many of these individuals are not afforded in saying that we trust you and we understand that you know what it is, and how dare I see your family as any different than my family. And I am going to give you that trust. I am going to allow you to do what it is that you need, and I am going to get out of your way, and I'm going to liberate the capital, period.
Liberate the capital. Can we get that on some t-shirts immediately?
You sure can, hashtag.
Hashtag. I mean, indeed. And Zea, I want to bring you in and shift gears ever so slightly so you can lay this out for us. And so one of the questions we had beforehand was, can you talk to us about what exactly is reproductive justice and why is it important, and how might a reproductive justice framework shape a guaranteed income program that Aisha and Ann have just laid out for us?
Oh, it's very much my pleasure to talk about this. So reproductive justice is a movement that really lifts up the freedom of every person to choose what kind of reproductive future and sexual life they want to have. And so often when we think about, reproductive choices, we think about the choice to not parent. We think about, ensuring that people have the choice to choose when they become a parent. But we often don't think about the other side of this, which is, what about when people want to choose to become a parent? What about the freedom to be able to raise your child with all of the resources and amenities that kids need in order to thrive? So reproductive justice really encompasses this whole conversation, not just around the freedom to access birth control and the freedom to access abortion choices when you want to and need to, but also the freedom to parent and to raise kids in a way that doesn't require you to be in abject poverty, but rather to be able to offer kids all the things that they need to grow and thrive. And as a pediatrician, I have a really interesting vantage point on this issue, I think, because, I had a patient a couple of years ago and she really sticks with me. She was so bright, really, really smart. And she got enrolled in a Parks and Recs science program after school. And she loved it. And she was so inspired and loved science. And I went to her science fair because she just couldn't wait for her doctor to know that she also was on this science path. And then what happened is that her mom lost some hours at work because her mom was an hourly employer and could no longer afford to bring her to the program. And this little girl's light went out. She was so disappointed. She was so devastated that she just stopped engaging in school altogether. And I think a lot of times about, what did we as a society lose when that happened? Like, if that mom had the flexible cash to continue to inspire her daughter to go to science classes, think about all that could have happened, all that can come. But when we don't invest in parents and families and kids, it's not just those individual parents and families and kids who are losing out. We all lose out. Like, maybe that little one was the future cure to cancer. Maybe that was the next pandemic vaccine developer right then and there that we just wasted, just like that. And so I think it's also really important when we think about reproductive justice that we're not just talking about the rights of parents, we're talking about our entire society's right to flourish and thrive as best we can.
Well, Aisha, I want you to build on what Zea has just said, because this idea of reproductive justice is connected to the idea of reproductive labor. That's the unseen work women often do in the home. And so, not to mention the emotional labor we do, not only are we doing the majority of the cooking and the cleaning, but we're also worrying about our families and how we're going to show up for everyone depending on us on a daily basis. So how might a guaranteed income help us show up for ourselves and also for the little girl that Zea mentioned?
No, yeah, definitely. So a guaranteed income allows you to show up for yourself. In an in and of itself, just because of that very reason, you know that you have the cash to address any emergency or any little fox is what I call them that may come up. And the little foxes are those things that you don't think about. It could be, oh, we're out of diapers, or it could be, oh, I hit a pothole. It allows you to take care of the little foxes, which is really what gets in the way and taking away your ability to continue to plan. And so guaranteed income is important for that reason. But, you know, it's like I was saying earlier, guaranteed income or cash without restrictions, knowing all that we know about the policies and our social safety net, it is not the bomb to solve everything. So, you know, we have to recognize that as a people, there are decades and generations of atrocities that we have to right in order to ensure that individuals have access to equitable future and equitable outcome for themselves. And specifically when we're talking about Black mothers, we know that there have been policies and programs put in place to their harm. And so specifically what we are saying with our work of centering Blackness in the conversation around guaranteed income is what would happen if we empowered Black women to be the author of their lives with the understanding that they and they alone know what they need for their families. What if we use what has been put in place for their harm and switch it and say, we're going to use this for your benefit. Here with our work in Mississippi, we are leveraging the fact that there's a low cost of living. So when you give someone $12,000, that is a life-changing amount of money. So it's time in this space with thinking about and having these conversations of guaranteed income on a massive scale for all of us to lean into radical possibilities and recognize that for decades we have been doing what Lucille Clifton calls, you know, making it happen with starshine and clay, and we don't have to operate in spite of anymore because of the work that has been the foundational work that has been done. We're all positioned to live on the other side and to really grow into that radical possibility and a radical joy that comes with the guaranteed income as well.
Yeah, it's this money is a level of freedom that in so many ways folks just can't imagine. And did you want to add anything to what Zea and Aisha have laid out for us?
Yeah, you know, we've talked a lot about the financial aspects, but let's talk about what that does in terms of a life of legacy.
That's
You
right.
know, when I think about the fact that, you know, thinking about my mom's own life and her own struggles, you know, I really can see now that part of her life was stolen from her. Those moments were stolen, right? When you think about someone, I was thinking about a story my mom said she was driving us to see our relatives and she had $20 to get us on an 8-hour trip. And she was just praying that she could make it. She could get the gas, she could feed us. And when I think about the moments in which my mom was so stressed, when she tried to be present and she was a wonderful mother, but what that took away from us, what that took away from her to fully be, you know, contributing and present with her family, with her friends, like this is our legacy. And we think about Black mothers in a way that they help us make sense of our lives, of ourselves, and that when those moments are taken away, they're taking away from a part of our legacy. So this goes beyond just the financial. It's what that manifests into. It's the ability to say, yes, I can go to a funeral and be with my family because I can afford to get there. It means that I can spend this afternoon with my children and not worry, am I going to be able to pay that bill tomorrow? Will I be able to continue to send them to this program? Can I help them get the supplies they need for school in ways that go beyond what is given through the school itself? These little things that all add up to a lifetime, that there are 1,000, probably 1 million stolen moments from us as Black people, from the fact that just because of cash, those things are taken away. And that takes away who we are and our legacy. So, you know, this is about the idea of what this can do in terms of stress, in terms of health, in terms of the fact that so many lives have been taken way too soon because folks were so stressed that they ended up having cancer or other types of illnesses that took their lives too soon. We know many people in this situation. So let's think about all the things that cash can do to enable someone to be who they were meant to be fully, to give them the dignity that they deserve, and that goes just beyond the dollar itself, but all the things that it means in our lives. So I think we have to keep that in mind, that we don't talk about that as much because it doesn't seem as valuable. but it is equally as valuable.
Aisha and Zea, I wanted to give both of you an opportunity to respond if you wanted to, because I felt like the three of us were having a little amen corner over here while Anne was talking. I was trying to distract her by nodding my head. But Zea, as a physician, Aisha, the work that you're doing that is on the ground, I didn't know if you all wanted to respond to some of what Anne has laid out, moving beyond the money, but also to this larger emotional daily space that Black women specifically are living in.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Anne, laid it out really beautifully. And I think that because of the capitalistic way in which we flow through society, we always want to talk about the role that money has as it relates to consumer sovereignty, but we never talk about the role of guaranteed income as it relates to the other pieces, as Anne was saying, about the legacy and the taking away stress. And what we have seen with our work is how for the first time, women are saying that they have joy and that they feel like they are good parents because they can say yes to some of the things that their kids want, not just the things that they need, and how that shows up in the generational impact of that. And we never have conversations about Black women joy, and we never have conversations about poor Black women and joy, because that's a luxury that we have told ourselves that they are not allowed to have. And I think so much of the damage in that narrative is that they believe they're not allowed to have that. So we buy into this idea of always having to be working, and we buy into this idea of I'm a pastor's kid, and so growing up an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So we buy into all of that. That's not true, and those are systems designed to keep us in a box. And so what this does, when you are able to show up with joy, you're able to slowly begin to tear apart that box. And so beyond what happens with your guaranteed income, whether or not it's a year or 18 months or whatever the program is that you're connected to, once you begin to take away that box and tear away at that box, it makes it really hard to go back in when you recognize that on the other side, you can see yourself in all that you're capable of. And so it's that legacy for yourself, it's the legacy for your kids. And that really, when I think about our work, I'm so looking forward to 20 years from now, when somebody tells the story, when they're giving their valedictorian speech, they tell a story about the year that their mama got money. They don't remember the name of the program, they don't remember who it was, but they know that that year was a life-changing year for their mom because she was able to show up differently. And that, to me, is also the beauty of cash. It allows you to be reintroduced to yourself and begin to see all the possibilities that you are when you begin to break away at that box. So.
Zea?
Also, just wanted to add that we think a lot at the Abundant Birth Project about cash being dignity. So many of the programs that low-income parents have to interact with, the TANFs and the SNAPs, they're such undignified programs. There's no dignity in somebody telling you exactly what you're allowed to eat, exactly how you're allowed to spend your money. There's no dignity in somebody constantly questioning whether or not you're honest, whether or not you actually need this. Like, who would ever go sit in the SNAP office for fun, right? Like, definitely people need it. And yet we're so paternalistic in these programs. We're so insulting. We're so dehumanizing that in order to receive the very basic funds that you need in order to keep your family and yourself afloat, you have to experience this constant dehumanizing process, this policing process, this surveillance, And so I think that, all of this stress, this lack of dignity, this is the texture that is really leading to these adverse health outcomes that we're talking about. We don't know exactly what the scientific mechanism is that is causing the specific hormonal cascade that causes babies to be born early. But what we do know is that stress, and in particular, racial stress, is very, very closely linked. And so, again, I would ask, when we're sending parents through these undignified programs, when we're making them try and make these ends meet, when we're trying to make them squeeze water from a stone, like, who is that serving? Because it doesn't serve the kids, and it doesn't serve the parents, and it doesn't serve our society as a whole either, And so what does it look like to use cash to return dignity, to give people a sense of control and agency over their future as they're bringing new life into the world? What does it look like to give people the sense of security and safety that goes along with knowing that you can control your own financial future? And so I think that there's so many aspects of humanity, and which includes joy and legacy. There's so many aspects of humanity that cash programs can return to folks. And in particular, Black people, because we're starting at a particular deficit because of structural racism. So I hope we're getting to that question next.
Not next, but we will get to it. Don't worry. Unless we want to get into it now. I mean, I had a question for Anne to lay some of this groundwork, but hopefully, and you can build in some of the structural institutional racism that we face. And Zea and Aisha, please feel free to jump in. But and I wanted to bring you in because we now have a president that's explicitly talking about racial equity approaches to a lot of the economic policies that are being rolled out under his administration. And so I wanted to know, how does centering Blackness specifically differ from a broad racial equity approach? And how do we encourage policymakers to do that work to undo some of the calcified institutional inequities that Zea just mentioned?
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, I have been working on the issue of racial equity for as long as I can remember. And though we have really seen that there's a great interest in addressing racial equity, I think that we're still at a somewhat of a sticky point, because I think that our understanding of racial equity has become a bit muddied in some ways, right? That you could talk about racial equity and not talk about racism. You can work on racial equity without really dealing with root structural causes, that you can still deal with the symptoms. You can still focus on the disparities and really not know exactly as a goal what we're trying to achieve. So I'm not against racial equity, of course, but I think that we need to be clear in our understanding of what we're actually trying to undo, what we're trying to actually build. And sometimes racial equity doesn't help us get there. It doesn't go far enough as far as I'm concerned, right? It's a stepping stone. So I applaud the administration for taking this on, because it just hasn't been done in any real serious way. It's really opening up the door for kind of new discussions on how to actually tackle problems that we've seen for decades. So saying that, us pushing out kind of a centering Blackness framework really is about a root cause, right? It is a root cause. Anti-Blackness is a root cause of who is valued in our society, period, right? And we know that Black people have been devalued and dehumanized, and they've been a counterpoint to measure other people's humanity, right? So really centering Blackness is about thinking about the perspective, the life experience of those who are most marginalized, for the fact that anti-Blackness is a foundational structure. It's foundational in our policies, in our practices, in our institutions, right? And we cannot make progress without undoing it, right? We can say that we built something and anti-Blackness can still exist. And if it still exists, we haven't gone far enough. So to me, what could be exciting in this moment is to start to really think about the kinds of, what would it mean to uproot and question and do all the things that have kept Black experience and Black life as less than, right? What would that actually look like? And to me, there is no other more radical place to start than our social safety net. I would love to see the movement around that, as we've seen around policing, right? Because these are systems intertwined, mass incarceration, child welfare, and welfare systems are completely intertwined. And a lot of them are about punitive governance, punishing particularly Black mothers. So centering Blackness is about undoing those harms, recognizing those harms, and the relationships that have ensued because of those harms. So it's undoing the harms, but it's also about building something up. It's not just about tearing down. It's about reimagining what's possible if we think about those who have been the most marginalized.
Zea and Aisha, I wanted to give you both time to respond and expand if you'd like to.
I mean, I love what you were describing just now and about recognizing the interconnectedness between police violence and the violence of our social safety net. I think that, very many people who are, trying to get paychecks work in these systems with the best of intentions, and yet they can't even divest from these impacts because of the ways in which it is so deeply baked into our system. And it's also important to recognize that this is not anything new, but there's such deep historical roots of this. I think that so often when I'm interacting with my physician colleagues, many of the folks in the Bay Area can recognize that, Black people tend to be disproportionately poor, and that might be impacting our health. But what many of my colleagues can't identify is exactly why. And in the absence of knowing why, they often go to racist cultural explanations, frankly, oh, it's trauma. Oh, there's, that maybe their parents didn't know how to have a job, and it just totally ignores the reality of things like redlining, the reality of the ways in which the New Deal was so racialized, the reality of urban renewal across so many of our communities, and the reality of ongoing racialization in the ability to get adequate employment, and be respected. I mean, here where I live in San Francisco, the Brookings Institute found that we have the second highest rate of Black unemployment in the country. Now, help me understand that, because as far as I can tell, like the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley has like one of the best economies in the world, right? And yet somehow in the city of progressive wealthy people, we still have the second highest rate of Black unemployment in the country. What that is absolutely about is this ongoing continuation of anti-Black racism in the world of economics and employment that continues to harm people. But I think that while people can name that, Black people tend to be poor, people can't name why, and they can't really truly understand the impact because so few people have experienced, frankly, Black poverty, which is not just to be poor, but then to also deal with the racism as you're trying to fix the poverty, right? And also trying to somehow magically bootstrap yourself out of centuries of like very targeted policy specifically created to keep us poor. And so again, when I think about cash, I very much agree with Anne that this is a wonderful like building block of opportunity, but it is only the beginning, right? There is so much dismantling and reimagining that we have to do if we want to authentically be addressing racism and specifically anti-Black racism.
Well, Zea, I think the magical bootstrapping is now called Tim Scotting. I think that's the 21st century term to do it. Aisha, did you want to add something?
Yeah, no.
I told you I'd behave only to a point.
I'm all about only to a point. There we go. Just to thread all those thoughts is when I was thinking about what both Anne and Zea was saying, I kept thinking about, yes, it's anti-Blackness, but and yes, we've got to have real conversations about racial equity, but I also kept thinking about the harm that is being done in internalizing that anti-Blackness, because that is, to me, that's what's happening. And those are the conversations that we really have got to start having real conversations about in boots on the ground, as it relates to movement building and advocacy, because unfortunately, what the system does and giving these false narratives and these half-truths, the system is designed in a way to make it feel as if you are the reason, and it is your fault that your reality is the way your reality is, not allowing you to call out that the system is designed in a way to perpetuate this harm. So Zea, when you were speaking about, how our social safety net is dehumanizing and it robs individuals of their dignity, it is designed that way. When we are talking about the fact that none of these pieces are interconnected, it's designed that way. It's designed to suck away your power and for you not to recognize you have power. And so then that ebbs over into all aspects of your life until where you're just exhausted and you're just working towards survival. And so with thinking about, how do we move forward with really thinking about cash and having these conversations around racial equity, those of us who are on the ground interweaving the work with advocacy and cash, or advocacy and innovation and policy, we really also have to make sure that we are educating individuals on what anti-Blackness looks like and how it is showing up in their day-to-day lives, and allowing them to have the language to call it out when they see it. So a perfect example, I was talking to one of our moms a couple of weeks ago about something. And she was like, oh, well, it's my fault because I just should budget better. And I was like, oh, it's your fault that you make $10 an hour? And she was like, well, oh, it's your fault that all the data indicates that nowhere can you raise a family off of $10 an hour. So it's your fault that you work every day as a home health worker and you are only paid $10 an hour, working 12 hours a day while also caring for your kids. How is any of that your fault? And she was like, oh, and I was like, oh, and it's your fault that you went to school, but now you have debt from going to school because you did the very thing that was told to you that you had to do in order to get your leg up. And so they have internalized, or we have allowed individuals to internalize this rhetoric that it is something that they are doing wrong without challenging the fact that it's not you doing anything wrong. It's the system that is wrong. But not only is the system that's wrong, it's all the rest of us who have allowed the system to perpetuate and have allowed individuals to live in the bubble and not have a true understanding of what poverty looks like in this country.
So Aisha, thank you for that. And I want to ask you and Zea specifically about this, because Black women are frequently not in the policy and program making conversations. And so in the work that both of you are doing, how were community members, and say a woman like you just mentioned, Black moms in particular, involved in the development of your guaranteed income programs?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So with our work, Black women were included in every aspect of the Magnolia Mothers Trust. We started thinking about this work in 2017, and I run an organization that's radically resident driven, so we don't do anything in isolation. Everything that we do is included, everything that we do is community included and community thinking and community forward. So I developed the Task Force of Mothers, and I said, I don't know what this thing is, but you all are telling me that you need cash. And I take my role as the leader of this organization very seriously. So let us dream about it and figure out what it may be. So our moms were included in everything from the design to the amount to the duration to every piece of it, to other supports that we provide. A perfect example of that is when we were first starting, I was thinking, okay, it has to be 18 months because all of the international literature were saying that a guaranteed income needed to be 18 months. And I was really pushing for that. And one of my moms who was on our task force, her name is Ebony, said to me, Miss Aisha, if you give me $1,000 a month for 12 months, you have doubled my income. That is enough. And I was like, oh, thank you so much for that check. So let me take myself out of this equation and really make sure that this work continues to center the needs of you all as we think about what it looks like. So that's how we started, with really thinking about, we're really making sure that we were intentional with our design and our model. But as we've been doing this work for the last couple of years now, we are recognizing that, okay, yes, we have got to get from program to policy. And how do we go about making sure that the individuals who have been most harmed by the policies that have been put in place, how do we make sure that they're included in reimagining what those policies should look like moving forward? So we have started all of this really beautiful narrative work with our organization, where we really are making sure that a lot of the individuals that we sometimes don't see or discuss when we're talking about policies and programs, that we're centering them in the equation, and we're making sure that they are empowered and have the support that they need to tell their stories, to share their stories, to participate in webinars and panels and op-eds, and all of the things that so many of the times us leaders of organizations are doing, but making sure that they are front and center in that work, because Anne always talks about how policy moves at the speed of narrative. And we have begun to understand that that narrative has to come from the people. We cannot change the narrative without changing the narrator. And so for us in our work, they were included in the design, but not only were they included in our design of our program, we are making sure that they would be included as we reimagine these policies by going about changing the narrative, by changing the narrator who's seen in this work as being valued.
Thank you. Zea, did you want to add to how you all incorporated Black moms in the development of your guaranteed income programs?
I do, but first I just want to appreciate you, Aisha. I just really appreciate you and the work you do. Thank you for being such an incredible leader. So I think that, I was just a plain old, like, every day in the clinic pediatrician until a few years ago. And so one of the things that I got to see a lot was how ineffective programs that are designed exclusively by the system are in the communities of color where they're meant to function. And so when I finally was given the keys to try and build my own thing, it felt really important to me to make sure that we are allowing the people who are going to be the future users of this program to guide the development, because they're going to be the ones who are going to best understand where the pitfalls are and where the opportunities are. And, as a Black woman who grew up in San Francisco, like, I understand some of that for sure, but I don't understand all of that because Black women are not a monolith. We are varied and we need wide representation, but also I think that it's important to acknowledge that having me at the table is half the equation, but my social economic position has changed a lot since when I grew up. And so it's really important that we have diversity of voices. So to achieve that, what we did is that we recruited and then hired 4 Black and/or Pacific Islander mamas, and we trained them in qualitative interviewing. And they in turn went out and they conducted a couple of dozen interviews with other mamas from the community to understand what worked for you while you were pregnant, what didn't work, what else do you need, what would have been helpful, and most to the point, what would you want to see from this cash program? And then just to really make sure that we were getting it, we trained those same community researchers in qualitative coding and analysis, and the data got coded. We did 2 human-centered design thinking sprints with community members because, you know, so often we have people kind of put together a plan and then they do a town hall and they run it in front of community, and like you can tinker around the edges community, but the big questions are already answered. But we wanted to bring these big questions to community. Ours is a pregnancy income supplement. And we wanted to know from folks, well, what happens if a woman loses her pregnancy, mid-pregnancy? What do we do with this cash? This is such an important decision. I didn't want us to hold this decision alone. And so it felt really wonderful to be able to constantly share this decision-making power with folks from community. And going forward, our community researchers are now working with the academic team to develop what the evaluation is going to look like, and what specifically are we going to ask mamas as they're receiving this cash, and how do we ask it? And it's, again, who better to decide how to do this than folks who were just pregnant and Black in San Francisco. And so it's just been really meaningful. And lastly, what I'll add is that by using this approach, we're building capacity in the community, right? Because it's really important for, you know, us to have future scientists, future qualitative researchers, future program designers who can sit in this wonderful space in between once using these programs and now developing these programs. And so what does it look like to not only share the decision making, but also to share the knowledge and the experience with folks, and then have that knowledge and experience that community members have that is very specialized also come and influence our program. So it's really been an incredible experience for me over this last year to build with the community.
Thank you. And Anne, I want to bring you in because you touched on this before Aisha and Zea just laid out their work, but I was wondering if we could kind of loop back and drill down just a little bit. But how does a guaranteed income program like the recently expanded child tax credit that will be providing cash to nearly every American custodial parent, even if they have little or no earned income, help us imagine, and you mentioned this before, the social safety net that works for Black moms in particular, and therefore everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an amazing step. I mean, we have to get cash in the hands. We need to get resources in the hands of families who need them, period. And this is a way to actually do that in a way we haven't even seen in many, many decades, right? So I really feel like this, you know, there have been people who have been working on this for a very long time, really understanding what it would mean in a design fashion to get those resources to people, especially those with very little income, and understanding that, the reality is that income flows in and out. You can have, steady work and then it drops off, and that an income can drop in a minute, in a dime, at the turn of a dime. So I think that this is a great step for us to think about child poverty, to talk about the fact that we need a lot of other kinds of policies around it, and not just in our tax code, but that it really requires us making huge government investments, something we have not done in the lives of struggling families. So it's a wonderful first step.
Aisha or Zea, did you want to add to that at all?
No, yeah, I think it's a wonderful first step, especially given our precarious relationship with cash without restrictions in this country. So the fact that we do see that coming forth in a child tax credit, when the media started connecting it to a guaranteed income, I was like, shh, not so loud. We don't want folks to know that it's cash. Let them think it's a waiver or a subsidy or something till we get it signed. So I do think it's a great first step. And I definitely know that it will help so many mothers, but there's still so much work that has to be done. There's work that has to be done on the ground, and making sure that individuals know that this is coming, making sure that individuals have filed their taxes. All of that has to be led by activists, because we have got to get the word out, and we've got to make sure that folks know to take advantage of this. But then there's also work that has to be done as we go about operationalizing work in this country, and making sure that it's just not given to those individuals who have filed taxes or who show up in work in our gig, in our economy, in a way that actually aligns with how we define work. And then the last piece I'll say is, still there's work to be done as it relates to who is actually eligible We know that in so many of our brown and Black communities that there are non-custodial caregivers caring for kids that they are never going to be able to claim on their taxes. So how do we go about making sure that grandmother or big brother or auntie or whoever gets the benefit of this guaranteed income as well?
Great, thank you.
Sometimes I just like with this child tax credit, I feel very excited. And I'm also like, it's really that easy, America. It's really that easy. Like this is like, you know, normally I think that if this had been billed as a basic income, we would have been fighting and struggling about this for like a gazillion years before we decided that maybe we were going to eke out $20 a month instead of, you know, $300 a month. But it's really that easy. And so when this expires in a year, it really is that easy again. And so I just hope that we can all be advocates for recognizing that this is just a starting place. This amount of money, while I think it might be life-changing for folks, especially post-pandemic, is not nearly enough money to have a thriving family in throughout most of the United States. And so it's really that easy. And it might even really be that easy to double it. It might be really that easy to get a federal minimum wage that actually provides a living amount of money to work with for families. And so like, how do we actually dream even bigger than this? You know, like how do we actually push for the big things? For so much of my life, and I'm in my mid-40s, I just felt like something like this would never even be possible. And so I just felt like my dreams were so tiny and they were not in alignment with what, you know, my community needed. And so I hope that this just inspires us to start dreaming in the way that all of our community needs, and not just dreaming, but also like demanding, requiring, creating accountability for these solutions that are really that easy. You know, it's really that easy to provide a foundational safety net for kids and families. And again, I just want to keep on reminding people, like, what is the downside to making sure that kids grow up healthy and they're able to achieve their maximum potential? Like, what is the downside for our country in that, right?
It's so interesting you say that, because when President Biden made his first big speech about possibly lifting 50% of America's children out of poverty, everyone's like, right on. And I was like, I'm sorry, I thought 100% would be the goal. Like, am I being greedy that we would want to lift 100% of our children out of poverty? But that's just me. So as we wind down, I want to ask each of you, Zea, I'll start with you, Zea, Aisha, and Anne, what have you all learned the most during this work? And what are the biggest barriers you're seeing, and how do we overcome them? You know, now we need to transition to some action steps. So what have you seen and how do we overcome it? So Zea, I'll start with you.
I mean, this is one of the biggest barriers early on, at least, was frankly anti-Black racism and just a perpetual perception that Black parents are poor because they're irresponsible, or because they don't know how to have a job, or because they're lazy, like all of these challenging narratives. And as Aisha already alluded to, what has been particularly painful is in that early research that we did with community, so many of those narratives were actually coming from Black parents themselves, right? We are trying to think about what does an unconditional cash transfer look like? And many folks that we interviewed were very uncomfortable with the idea of giving Black parents an unconditional cash transfer. And I'm talking about other Black parents were uncomfortable with that idea, you know? And so I think that so much of the stigma, and you know, it's not by accident, right? This is absolutely because of this narrative around the welfare queen that has been operationalized, you know, for politicians dating back, you know, from Nixon through now, you know, and it wasn't just Republicans, you know, Clinton was a huge pusher of this narrative around lazy Black parents on benefits. And so I think that, you know, the important work for us to do is what Aisha was talking about, which is to keep on lifting up how racism is impacting Black people and other people of color. This is not just an accident. This is not just laziness. This is not just, I don't know how to manage my checkbook. This is systematic and on purpose. And so we need to lift up that aspect of it. But I also think we need to, you know, actually do some like restorative healing work. There needs to be some acknowledgement of the harm that has been caused by politicians on both sides of the aisle by representing this false narrative. There's deep harm that comes not just to Black people, but to all of us, because that narrative is used to destroy, you know, low income supports for folks across the board. So I think that that's one of the most important barriers. And I think that the cure is for us to get very specific around naming what the issue is, naming racism, and being very specific around creating accountability for racist actors.
Ditto
Aisha?
to everything that she just said. Ditto to all of that. I think for me, the other pieces that I have learned is that Black women have the ability to conjure horizons out of possibilities that we did not even know were possible. And so using faith and sheer will and might just to really operate in the space of radical possibility. And so by having the profound privilege that I have to work in community, that has allowed me to have an imagination of what's possible that is beyond anything that I know I hold on my own. And so when I think about what is possible, I know that we can have a country without poverty. I know that the systems that we designed were designed and we can redesign new ones. And I know that Black folks are going to be the people that lead the way in the designing of our new possibility, because we're going to lean into the wisdom of our ancestors and the power of our imagination. So that is what I know to be sure. Now, the hard stuff in doing this work, Christina, that's a whole other panel, girl. So we'll just say that for the second hour.
That's for Okra and another panel. And
Yeah, what could I add to what's been so beautifully said? I think the idea of how can we focus on building a humane system? I mean, that to me is radical possibility, right? We have not built systems that really are about people's humanity. You know, they are completely designed to punish and dehumanize. I mean, at their very core, all the way through, and how states carry out all of these policies and go even further, right, in the way of surveilling and punishing, particularly Black people. So there is, to me, the idea of what's possible is really being shown to me in some of these pilots, and I love kind of some of the work that you're doing, Aisha, because you really do talk about this issue of Black joy. And honestly, we don't think that we're deserving to actually talk about what does it mean to have Black joy, and to know that we are deserving of that. And that's a counter narrative to all the things that Zea just talked about, right? All the ways that we are made to feel that something is the matter with us, and it is deep rooted. There's money invested in that narrative. I mean, it's done for a very, very clear reason. And so to actually be able to now kind of uproot that, and to really think about what's possible in addressing poverty in a real way, I think that's what this is kind of teaching me. And also just everything around the narratives that have been at the core of why we're seeing what we're seeing today. So we have an opportunity to really think about how those play out in people's lives, and how cash can actually disrupt some of those narratives. I mean, we have a long way to go, but I think when we can really speak, and women are speaking on their own, from their own perspective, on their own stories of what does it mean to have a vacation, like basic things that, why should that be a luxury, right? And we know why it's a luxury, or seen as a luxury for some people, because we don't feel they're deserving of that. So I love how we're bringing the issue of Black joy into some of these conversations.
I love it too. Well, we have 1 minute left, and I always like to end on, what are our marching orders? We've had people on this panel watching this panel for 1 hour. Zea, Aisha, Ann, what is the one takeaway if we can do right now to support Black moms based on your work and what we've just listened to?
If you're in California, you should please call your local representative and your state level representative and ask them to support SB 65, which is the California's Omnibus bill that would include a guaranteed income of $1,000 a month for all low income Californians, including undocumented folks.
Thank you. Aisha, what is our marching order?
All of us run organizations. You can liberate some capital our way, but then also get connected to whatever is happening in your community as it relates to guaranteed income. There are pilots and demonstrations popping up all over the country. And if you don't like the way that the pilot is being designed, push back, recognize the power that's in the community, and make sure that it's lining up with what's needed.
Thank you. And Ann?
Yeah, I can't add much there. I mean, there are policies on the table right now that we can be supporting. There are local movements, actions to think about helping mamas that are dealing with our cash bail system, that we can contribute to as you can contribute to as an individual, and certainly getting involved in some of these local pilots, being informed. And we need a movement. We need a movement to upend some of these systems that really have played a major role in holding back our potential. So love to see more organizing around that.
Well, I can't thank each of you enough, and I want to thank Ebony Childs for inviting me here to moderate. Please, for those of you who are watching, check out cashascare.com. It's also in the chat, where you can donate to Magnolia Mothers Trust and Abundant Birth Project, and you can also find the latest report. I want to thank our panelists, the viewers, everyone who tuned in today, but especially Dr. Zea Malawa, Dr. Aisha Nyandoro, and Ann Price. I'm hoping we can do this again. Thank you again for the work you do tirelessly and effortlessly, make it seem.